You're listening to the Roundup Podcast, a podcast on reaching the college campus, developing leaders, and sending out kingdom multipliers. This podcast is created by the Southern Baptists of Texas Convention and provided through cooperative program giving.
Well, howdy, friends, and welcome to the Roundup Podcast. I am your host, Mitch Tidwell, and I have with me today my co-host, Kylie Badgley. Kylie, how's it going?
It's going good. I'm already planning my trip in my head to London. It looks really cool.
Oh, yeah. We're super excited today. We just watched a video, Redeemer Queens Park. We have Thomas West on today, who is a pastor there. And so we just got through watching the video of just their vision and then also kind of a Christian walk through the city and its history. So we have Thomas on today. Thomas, how's it going, man?
Mitch, Kylie, it's going great. So happy to be on with y'all today for having me.
Man, we're glad to have you. So right now you are stateside, correct? Just enjoying some lake house before you head on back?
Yeah, that's it. We came over just last week on the 1st of July, getting some good time to slow down here at the lake. We'll be up in Raleigh, where we spent the last 10 years, Montgomery and Birmingham, visiting with family. Really glad to be stateside for a bit.
Man, well, it's good to have you guys back for a minute. So, back in October of 2019, I went on a vision trip to London and ran across you guys and among some other churches. But I was able to go on a kind of a vision tour and get to know you guys a little bit, and really was just super impressed with what you guys are doing. Just the vision that God has given you for planting a church in London, and then also was very intrigued by just your background because you were, formerly a college pastor, so which is kind of the lane of this podcast. But before we kind of jump into all of that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Thomas? Tell us, where you're from. Tell us about your family and all that.
Mitch, thanks so much, man. It was really great getting to meet you just months ago. Really happy to be on today. I'm so grateful to be on with you guys. Born and raised in Montgomery, Alabama. Went to Auburn for university from 2004 to 2008, and really loved the time at Auburn. It was just a really great season. My college years were very formative for me through those college years in university. So I'm just so grateful for what God did in my own life as a college student. Just so grateful for those years and some men that looked after me and mentored me. Known my wife,
hey, by the way,
Elizabeth.
Thomas,
I've actually.
Hey, real quick, were you at Auburn when it was Cadillac Williams? And this is total side note. And Ronnie
No.
Ronnie Brown, was that his name?
That's it. This is important as anything we'll talk about today. I'll promise you that.
That just hit me.
that time. That time at Auburn, 2004 was a really great year at Auburn. We had Jason Campbell at quarterback.
Yes,
we had Parnell Williams at running back. We had Ronnie Brown. We had a really star-studded defense as well. It was just fantastic. That year, 5 guys go in the first round of the draft.
Oh, man.
And it was just historic.
Who was the coach then?
And the coach then was Tommy Tuberville.
Tommy Tuberville. Yeah, Tuberville, man. Awesome.
Fantastic, man.
All right. Hey, we'll get back on track here. I always relate things back to football some way, shape, or form. So,
well, listen, I am talking to the mighty Texans right here, so I'm happy to keep it in that frame as long as you guys want to go.
Yeah.
Come on. Man, the time in university was really good and really important for me. Another piece that was just really important is my wife, Elizabeth. Elizabeth and I have known each other our entire life. So when Elizabeth was born, my mom actually took me to visit her in the hospital. And
wow.
That was it. I don't know if seeing somebody in their diaper, it just really got things going. So Elizabeth and I have been happily married, coming up on 11 years this August here in 2020. And it's been fantastic. Elizabeth and I, after Auburn, we got engaged senior year. I ran on ahead to Southeastern Seminary in Wake Forest, North Carolina. Started for the master's there. Elizabeth and I got married and then moved up to North Carolina. Loved our 10 years in Raleigh. For MDiv, was on for the PhD. Started as a college pastor at Providence Baptist Church. And at the end of that 10 years in Raleigh, we found ourselves in London, England, planting a new church. So
Man.
I know that's a little bit of everything and a lot of Auburn football, but that's usually how my story goes.
Yeah, dude, I love it. You know what's fun? It's just, and I think I've talked to you about this, but there have been, I was an interim college minister at a church here in downtown Fort Worth, and we actually had one of your students that came from Raleigh who had come to TCU, Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, and she was actually in our ministry. So I was like, wow, crazy connection.
Right.
Her, then I met you in London. And then the church I was serving at, also the worship pastor that was at Providence ended up coming to be the worship pastor at my home church in Keller. And so I'm like, this is kind of weird to have these three different people that I've met that had come from the same church, and I met them in different locations. It was just kind of crazy, but that's beside the point.
So good, man. So good. So good.
Yeah. So Thomas, after all that, can you tell us just how you chose college ministry and how you got started in that?
Yeah, I mean, if I could just be really honest, I mean, hopefully this will be helpful for anybody out there thinking, like, sensing the Lord calling them to gospel ministry, but not sure what exactly they're being called to. That was me. So that was Elizabeth and I. We sensed the Lord calling us. Like, we knew he was tugging on our hearts. We should know how it'd play out. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you just you look around the church, and I mean, while I was in Auburn, actually worked on staff with a student ministry. I think I had my fill. The Lord gave me everything I needed in a couple of semesters with that. But you're just thinking, I don't know, maybe it'll be lead pastor, some type of staff pastor. And it was the year that I finished my MDiv, finished the time studying for the masters at Southeastern, and actually was playing golf with a pastor of another church in town, wonderful guy named Dave Owen, who was the former college pastor at Providence Baptist Church. We were out playing around a golf, and specifically remember it was I think it was the par 5, number 15th at Wildwood Green in Raleigh, and we're just having this conversation. He's like, "Dude, what are you doing?" I'm like, "I don't know." Like, I sense the Lord like tugging on us that some type of move's coming, and Dave just started telling me about a college pastor position at Providence Baptist Church in Raleigh that was coming up. And I'm just like, man, let's be talking about that. Yeah. And some conversation started at Starbucks, and one thing led to another, and you're kind of interviewing for a college pastor position. And let me tell you, it's not something that I wouldn't have chosen for myself in the sense that I was opposed to it. It was just one of those things. I'm just trying to be available. I'm just trying to get ready and available for ministry. Yeah. And the Lord just kind of put his hand on it and moved into a ministry that it turns out I am just so glad to have had the experience in. It shaped me profoundly as a pastor and a minister of the gospel, and given me, I mean, I feel a bit selfish, to be honest, but gave me like a real set of skills that I'll carry with me for the rest of my life, the lessons I learned in college ministry. And I think it was a benefit to some other people along the way. So
yeah, I mean, what was probably one of the things that you valued the most on just those college years and what you learned about just ministering to students?
Man, it's been said that the two most formative periods in a person's life, birth to 5, and then those years 18 to 25. Mm-hmm. And I think that's exactly right. I mean, birth to 5, you literally can't do anything. You have to have a team of people around you, taking care of you, looking after you, supporting you, doing things for you, right? Mm-hmm. It's an extremely formative season. It's undeniable. 18 to 25, you have freedom like you've never had it before. You have the ability to learn, to connect with people, to network, to set habits and precedents in your own life. And they're not necessarily make or break years, but you have the opportunity to set a trajectory that you'll ride on for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. I loved working with people at that formative period of their lives. Major worldview questions are up for grabs. Yeah. Major identity questions are up for grabs. It's a critical time for me where you can work with people that are probably processing their childhood in those early years for better and for worse. Different types of counseling can be helpful in those years. I just love how impressionable and informative those years are. For people. I just loved entering into that season of life with people and doing life with them. So that was really just it. I mean, the questions people are asking, the hunger for God, the way that people are just seem ready to like address and deal with some real life issues. Yeah. It just seems to be this like unprecedented time of access, like spiritually, where people are willing to do some work in their hearts that you don't really have before that, 18 years old. And it's tough to kind of get back to. It's kind of tough to drop back into that gear in that season once you kind of pass through graduation 25 and beyond. So
yeah, that's good.
Felt like a bit of a ramble, but that's it.
No, that's good, man. So how in the world did you get from a place of, serving in this church 10 years, doing college ministry, to say, hey, let's pack up our family and let's go plant a church in London, which I only imagine has got to be one of the hardest places to plant a church. How did that happen?
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure that one out, to be honest with you guys. To be really direct, it was actually getting involved in church planting as a college pastor. So the irony of this moment is when I surrendered, and I wish you could see the size air quotes I'm putting on this thing right now. When I surrendered to gospel ministry, I had two conditions, because don't all great surrenders have conditions? My conditions were these: Lord, I don't want to live overseas, and I don't want to have to start a new church, right? So I'm happy to live in America, and I'm happy to be a part of one that's already up and running. And the Lord has a great sense of humor. So when I was 2 years into college ministry, our church, Providence, started supporting another church plant in Toronto, Canada, led by Mike Seaman and Daniel Yang. Mike is still there. Daniel's working with Ed Stetzer at Wheaton right now, developing the church planting residency. Man, being involved with those guys and just watching them hammer it out is what really got me on this path. Toronto specifically is the city that birthed in this, Southern boy, a love for cities. And walking with those guys, like a couple of times a year, we'd mobilize a group of college students, hop on the plane, you end up in Toronto, and you're just doing some ministry. More importantly, you're just getting to do some life with these guys that are trying to do the thing in the place. The Lord used that to plant something in my own heart. It was really it was partnership, and our church began to partner with other church plants, Boston, Washington, DC, Miami, just different guys in different places trying to do the same thing, trying to plant these outposts of the gospel in strategic North American cities. Yeah. That's a lot of what got me on this road. Specifically for London, was opened up through my research for my PhD, studied with a man named Bruce Ashford, wonderful, wonderful man, both in and out of the classroom at Southeastern Seminary. I started studying the life and writings of a British missionary and theologian named Leslie Newbigin, Newbigin. He's on Twitter, by the way. You need to check that out. Leslie Newbigin, Newbigin. Started reading Newbigin early in my PhD seminars. And Newbigin is this guy who grew up in Great Britain, trained at Westminster and Cambridge, went to India as a foreign missionary, and he returned to Europe towards the end of his life. And he started asking the question, why is the church in Western culture not living with urgency like the church in India, like the church in the East? And it led Newbigin to ask a new series of questions. What would be involved in a genuinely missionary encounter between the gospel and modern Western culture? So a couple of things: reading Newbigin, practically going and visiting and praying for and supporting church planters. That became the secret recipe that the Lord was planting in my heart that would eventually give way to moving to London.
Man. Well, we actually, but as I said earlier, before we got on this call, we watched, a video about what you guys are doing, and then also just the Christian heritage in London. And it's pretty amazing, especially, I actually went on that tour with you guys back in October of 2019, and then getting to watch that again. But it was amazing because, 5 months before I went on that trip, me and my wife actually went to London, took a tour of London, and we just completely passed by a lot of these pretty significant places where God has done incredible work in local churches across London. And so it's been a very significant place, very kind of catalytic place for Christianity throughout the history. So I don't know. I guess the question I'm kind of saying all that to wonder, like, when you consider London and you visited those people, what just seems to be, and you studied Newbigin, but really, why is it? I mean, if you're bringing your whole family over there, that's a really big deal. So why? I mean, I guess why London? Why is that such a? I mean, why do you feel like that's the biggest bang for your buck there? That's probably a bad way to say it, but you know what I'm saying.
I'm saying, no, I'm tracking with you. Yeah, I mean, so we read the book of Acts and we see the Apostle Paul. He had this one life to give, right? I mean, just one life to go. And he was content to move around the great cities of the ancient world and to try to start gospel movements, really to plant local churches in those cities. So, the first and biggest reason is you look at Acts and you just see this city strategy and the city movement kind of emerging from the story of Acts. And I got to tell you, teaching through Acts twice as a college pastor, that was a really big piece of this. Like you're working through and you're like, man, it's a city strategy. Yeah. I mean, Paul is just hopping around the cities. Mm-hmm. It's not to say that, the small towns are insignificant. No, like it's actually Crete that gets Titus. I mean, one of Paul's most trusted guys. So there are no insignificant people. So there are no insignificant places. But man, when you read Acts, it's a city movement. Next, when I'm in Toronto. It's this global, urban, diverse city. I mean, it's arguably the most diverse city on the planet. Mm-hmm. Coming to love the diversity personally, and then an ambition to trying to raise and rear some children in a global, urban city, like really full of all different kinds of diversity. That became a desire, like Psalm 37, a desire that the Lord started planting in our hearts. The other thing, it is Newbegin. I mean, it's what would be involved in a genuinely missionary encounter between the gospel and modern, now postmodern Western culture. That question really became like his question. I guess I inherited it, so to speak. It's become my question. It's become like a real ambition that we're living with. So, you kind of combine all that and just, you're having spaghetti with young kids around the table and you're just kind of talking these things out over the years of making disciples on the college campus. And the Lord somehow cooks all of that together. I mean, London's this beautiful, dynamic, diverse city. I mean, it's home to 8.6 million people by night. The swell every week for work, Monday to Friday, 8 to 6 for work. The city's home to 11 million people. I mean, so all of these people come into the city to work. There's over 300 languages spoken in London. It's incredibly diverse. It's estimated that half the people that live in London did not grow up in England. I mean, it's so diverse. And it's less than 2% reached with the gospel. Statistically unreached by the International Mission Board. Some statistics, even with the Church of England, actually estimate the saturation of Christianity as low as 1.6%. So it's a place of incredible diversity. I mean, it's a beautiful, fun city. But man, it is lost and broken, in desperate need of the gospel, and that's why we're there.
Man, that's good. I've got the Leslie Newbegin Twitter account pulled up here. 10,500 followers, man, and you're just throwing out some tweets, Leslie Newbegin tweets, man. This thing's big.
He goes, man. Yeah. He goes. He's incredibly tweetable. I mean, I think what I love about him. He's kind of like Martin Luther. Yeah. He was an occasional thinker, an occasional writer, didn't sit down and write the big systematic piece, kind of wrote for whatever the needs of the day were. But man, he was an evangelist and a pastor, and he just had a way of putting things into short, punchy phrases. So he makes it easy.
Oh, man. I love it. I love it.
That's cool. Okay. I want to ask about your family, but I want to back up a little bit. You said you've known your wife your whole life. So can you tell us, like, briefly how that changed from, I don't know, being like childhood friends into dating and marriage?
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
It's getting real.
No, here we go. I'm so glad this is just me, because her true telling of these facts right here, it would be very different. Maybe we have her back for another episode. I'm kidding. Not really, of course. So I specifically remember 17 years old on a choir tour. Can we get a shout out to choir tour on this podcast? On a choir tour with First Baptist Church, Montgomery, Alabama. We are in Savannah, Georgia at an ice cream shop. And it was one of those moments, you're just kind of sitting there, 17-year-old dude, just scanning the shop. And man, I just saw Elizabeth in a way, it was as if I saw her for the first time in my whole life, right? I mean, we grew up at First Baptist together. We've seen each other multiple times, like throughout the week, our entire lives. And it was one of those moments. I mean, you're in high school, you look, and it was like, hello, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, just, can I start talking with you? So, yours truly had the amazing strategy. I would try to connect with Elizabeth by trying to connect with all of her friends, right? Maybe somebody else out there has actually attempted this one before. So you try to call her friends and talk to her friends as a way of like circling and getting to her, but that was incredibly confusing because she thought I was into all of her friends except for her.
It, man.
And I specifically remember our first date. We went to Jalapenos Mexican restaurant in Montgomery, Alabama.
Nice.
Then we went to see Halloween movie, even though I hate scary movies, but I was desperate to hold her hand. And went to Sonic afterwards, saw some friends from church, and one thing led to another, and we're dating. I do need to go on record and just refer to myself as the biggest idiot you've ever heard of for breaking up with her multiple times in university. That's all about my immaturity. Absolutely nothing on her, but wised up like many guys do in college. Part of it's Holy Spirit, part of it's other men. Started dating her and pursuing her in the right way, and then we were on the road to marriage.
No, man. Then you saw the other guys. You're like, man, I got to grow up. We got to get this together.
That's it. I got to figure out my junk, man.
Oh, dude, that's awesome.
Oh man, that's cool. That's a sweet story. So what did they think? What did they think about going to London and planting? And was that something that stirred in you first and then you told Elizabeth, or was it something together? Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's a great question, Kylie. Come home from the first trip I took to Toronto. Elizabeth had just put our daughter Perry, who actually turns 7 tomorrow, July 9th, actually put Perry down for a nap. And I walk into the house and I'm like, babe, we got to pack this place up. We got to go plant a church. And she's just like, wait a minute, like, what did you just say? Like, why aren't we doing something here? Like, why in the world? That was the start of a conversation. And fast forward just the next year, the in-laws, Elizabeth's parents, who are really just great people, lovely people. They're in town. I come back from another trip to Toronto. We go out to eat, and, fiery and bold me looks at my in-laws over this really nice meal they were taking us out to. And I was like, I just need you guys to know we're going to move to Toronto one day and plant a church, and I just need you to go ahead and get on board with that. Needless to say, the rest of that dinner was extremely quiet, right? I told you I got this streak of being an idiot that runs through me. And like so much, I mean, we all need tempering in our lives, right? And as the Holy Spirit just started really refining this thing, I can live on the extremes, so the really high highs and the really low lows. But I mean, we all want to be in that sweet spot. So as the Spirit would just cultivate and refine this over the years, I was able to just continue conversations with Elizabeth. And at first, something that's like, man, that just seems too big. That just seems like too different. Started turning into, well, I mean, what would that look like? And, there was actually a real turning point in our story. It was in the spring of 2017. Elizabeth actually came with me on one of these trips to Toronto. And I remember the specific spot. We were in the city. We're holding hands. We're walking. And Elizabeth just says to me, I can see it. I don't know when, don't know where, don't know how. I can just tell God's leading us to plant a church. And that was in the spring of 17. And we're getting on an airplane in the summer of 19 to move to London. I think the big thing that really does deserve being stressed there is it wasn't easy. It wasn't overnight. It wasn't a moment. It was a string of moments. It was a string of conversations. It was something that God had to unfold and develop for us in our hearts over time. It was me being too excited that made her just a little unsure. And then it was me calming down, and it was her warming up, and the Lord really did a work over time. And it's all him. There's a verse that we'd hang over this though. Yeah. Psalm 37 verse 4, delight yourself in the Lord and he'll give you the desires of your heart. This obviously means God's not just going to baptize our desires, to like own a football stadium or to have a car, like whatever ridiculous things we're capable of coming up with. The idea is, delight yourself in the Lord, and he'll actually start planting those new desires in your heart. And that's what we've experienced. Longly, gradually, slowly over time, the Lord working in our hearts to give us a love for cities. And I mean, guys, we're from Montgomery, Alabama. Hello. Giving us a heart for like really being among every type of diversity imaginable.
Yeah.
The Lord just started planting these things in us as we were as we had our heads down in Raleigh, like trying to make disciples and reach the unreached on the college campus. I mean, I'm mentoring guys, she's mentoring girls, and we're just going for it in context. That's actually where that kind of planting for the future came. It was, I guess, the thing that continues to just blow my mind. If I had to even look up and tell you in the middle of it all, I would have guessed Toronto because that was just kind of the thing there. But we couldn't even see what the Lord was really preparing us for. And we're just so grateful.
Man, that's good, man. When Olivia and I visited, London, which we went on a vacation, and then when I went back with you guys, I come back and I told Olivia, I said, well, by the way, first of all, I received the name we were going to name our son on that trip with you guys in October 2019. I came back, I said, we're naming him William. And she goes, you've been in London way too long. And I was like, no, I just really, I don't know why. Like, it was not a name that I'd would ever think I would name my child, but it's like, and then finally she was like, you know what, I think that is what we want to name him. So our son's name is William. That was birthed out of a Holy Spirit moment, October 2019 in London. So just man. FYI, man, you're part of that story, Thomas.
Come on.
But, being there, I really felt, and now, of course, when we were on vacation, we were in kind of the southern part of London, I think around, is it Balham?
Balham. Yep.
And then, of course, I can't remember exactly where we were at with you guys, kind of more in kind of central London. Or were we northern London? I can't remember. Anyways, go ahead.
I think we spent time around, central, the city of London, and then we spent that time out in the hood in Queen's Park, right?
Oh yeah. And I just felt like being there. I was, because of course we stayed in an Airbnb in a neighborhood, and there was just a ton of activity. There was a ton of, of course, little shops, places to get coffee, places to get breakfast. And by the way, the food and coffee game is incredible in London. The old narrative is not great, but yeah, we loved it. But there seemed to be a real, I don't know if I would say like communal aspect, but a lot of people crossing paths and together. And I told Olivia, I was like, I really love just this place. I love the pace of it. I love this. And it just seems like it would be a place that you could plant a church, but we know historically it's actually been a pretty hard place. So why don't you share with a little bit about kind of your experience, because I think probably, being there for at the max 2 weeks, that's a pretty romanticized, view of it. So what has been your experience in this year about connecting with the people in London and how that's gone for you guys so far?
Man, that's a great question. I mean, great insights in there. Seriously, Mitch, really good insights. You're right. You have third spaces in London that is honestly very attractive and desirable compared to what a lot of what our experience here in the States is. And I mean that is from Montgomery to Auburn to Raleigh, from the things I can personally attest to. But I mean, you think about it, you might live in a smaller house or a smaller flat. Some people live in just more of like the studio type setup, just one room where it all happens, And it just makes going to the pub, which isn't a bar in like the American sense, going to the pub, which is a public house, of a place that, yes, it has a bar, but it also just has hearty food, board games in the corner, old rickety tables. And the expectation is that you're going to kind of set up, and you and your people, your family, y'all are just going to relax for a little bit. It makes going to the cafe, it makes going to the public house just something that you're looking forward to, because it has like some terrible winters. It honestly is gray and misty a lot. And it just makes going and kind of kicking back and relaxing in a public space, more attractive. Now, at the same time, while that's true, it does seem to be two very specific layers of skepticism. I mean, the general one is after we got to just meet some people that are now friends, they tell us in the first couple of encounters, I hope you aren't offended. Like, we're just a very skeptical people. And I appreciate it. That's very honest, because they are. I mean, ways that in the American South, somebody just might be a little more accepting. It just draws questions. So people that are generally skeptical, there's two special skepticisms reserved. One is for Americans. Americans aren't really seen as the heroes or, the great hope of the day, especially with from everything from politics to some cultural stuff. I mean, it's just you're kind of over there, and regardless of where you're coming from, I mean, you could be anywhere, to be honest with you. People just receive you as an American with a higher level of skepticism. And in addition to that, a special skepticism reserved for anyone who is religious or connected to the church. So I say that just to be very honest about, man, it is one of those situations where it does feel like the cultural deck is really stacked against you, and at the same time, there are some really great people living in London, especially in Queen's Park, that can just be really open and inviting and accepting as well. It's a cosmopolitan city. It's got that thing that all the cities, all the way back to Paul, had: open to new ideas, open to innovation, creative takes on reality, and yes, even spiritual reality. So there is an opportunity to really be had there as well. So in the cafes and the pubs, and it's a little more of like, let's get around, let's hang out. But there's this kind of general skepticism kind of in the room. And then if it's American or even quote, quote, religious, which we don't even use religion, we're just really trying to talk about Jesus and the gospel all the time. There's just this special kind of extra measures for you. And when I say all of that, a year in, looking back, God has been incredibly kind in giving us favor, introducing us to some people of peace, and really just going before us and making way for us to be able to settle in.
What's the why the skepticism around religion?
Yeah, I think it's complicated. I mean, there's the few bits I've been able to work out so far. I mean, you do have a state church. You have the Church of England, and further north, you have the Church of Scotland. So that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, that's a dynamic that we Americans, like, we've actually never thought of it. Now, we might come from context to where many people are Christian or many people are religious, but not in the sense that there's, the state American church, but it literally is the Church of England. I think growing up in that environment, I'm still trying to indwell what that must be like. Yeah. I think another reason is some will have gone to different types of schools that would have like a chapel service, and many of the chapel services, maybe the person leading isn't the most dynamic person in the world. And from a very young age, it plants something in your mentality that's like, well, that's at least old or folded up or whatever, right? Another factor could be just how cosmopolitan and diverse the place is. So in a pluralistic society, to basically say, well, yeah, this is the one true and right way necessarily condemns those others, could be a resistance out of the lovely Muslim and Hindu neighbors that you have, that you just don't want to claim that anyone can be right. And when one does make a big deal about being right, well, that's just all the more cause for concern. Yeah. I think there are probably some other reasons, but that's just a few.
Yeah. I got another question here that I didn't have on here, but like, if you're going to be, an American doing ministry there in London, what's probably the best approach to take? Because as you said, there's already kind of some skepticism with Americans. So what would be your top just a couple like do's and don'ts as an American doing ministry in London?
Yeah, I think it comes down to temperament. I mean, I really do. There have been multiple ways where I've had to really adjust and accommodate my approach as a college pastor to trying to be the lead pioneering pastor for new work. There are ways that I could walk onto a college campus or into a college coffee shop that simply would do the opposite of what we're trying to accomplish in London. So the deeper issue there is reading your context, finding those cultural norms, and really trying to live into them. Right. When it comes to church startups, I mean, there are those different varieties, right? I mean, it's pioneer planting. Then it's kind of the going in and the church restoration or restart model. That's another one. And sometimes it's just taking a whole load of people from a place and just kind of doing, this is basically a functioning church on day one. We don't have the connections to do option 3 there. There's no taking 50 people from a congregation and going somewhere else. 50 people at a church is a solid church in London, by the way. There's really no like coming in and restarting one that's already up and going. Again, we're the outsiders. It really is this pioneering approach. But even there, just trust in the Spirit. I mean, really, like we're not that smart. It's just trust in the Spirit and doing as much reading and research as we can to say, man, when do we need to be strong? When do we need to be aggressive? And when do we need to be calm? And when do we need to be quiet? All that wraps up into this idea. It really has been a year of genuinely and humbly really submitting ourselves to the city and earning trust. So a lot of that happens through the wives at the school gate. My wife, Elizabeth, Daniel's wife, my associate's wife, Paige, working the school gate. It really comes down to when COVID hits, Elizabeth fires up a WhatsApp group to get our whole network, neighborhood street connected. And the purpose there isn't so we can share the gospel with them. It's so that we can know people and love people. It was in those early days, getting really involved with the school PTA. In God's incredible grace, one of our incredible neighbors actually nominated me for a position on the school PTA only a few weeks into us living there. And I help with social media and some fundraising for the school. And it's just, man, like, wow, like God really awesome. Is doing those things that help grant favor and ultimately access.
That's great, dude.
That's cool. So what advice would you give someone who is wrestling with the idea of planting?
Yeah, I mean, man, a big piece of it is I mean, we can't really resist. I mean, Daniel Yang, who's now, he's a great Twitter follow, by the way, is now at Wheaton. Daniel provided some really good counsel for me. I actually told him, like, bro, I'm just wrestling and I'm scared to really lean into it. And Daniel had a great word. Daniel's like, man, you've got to learn to lean into the wrestling, because it's actually in that wrestling, when you feel the rumbling, that God actually could be kind of uprooting you and ready to plant you somewhere else. Or actually through that wrestling, he's actually going to anchor you and settle you deeper where you are. But the only way to know which it is actually to give yourself over to that process of it, to see like what's going on. So in my experience, so many times at different junctures of the faith journey, you sense the Lord calling you out into obedience, into a new way of doing things, into something you're going to release or something you're going to pick up. And we just resist, don't we? But I mean, man, it's really just giving ourselves over to the small acts of obedience. Okay, I'm going to go on a trip. Okay, I'm going to encourage my church to partner with this church plant. I mean, even partner with us. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, just take a step, get involved, go partner. Just pull alongside of a guy or a family or a team for a week and just see what the Lord does in your heart. I think the Lord is actually really tender with his yoke. I mean, that's what Jesus leads us to in Matthew, right? If we would just yield and let the thing kind of fall in place around our necks, I think we'd see, wow, it actually is a really easy yoke if we'll just quit resisting and just kind of give ourselves over to the thinking, to the praying, to the searching it out. So there's a lot in there. I mean, from the heart level, just trying to look at Jesus and just trust him and to take a few next steps. But practically with that, go visit a church plant. Different church planters, families, wives, like my wife Elizabeth, will even do like a blog. I mean, just read the blog, follow it, follow somebody on social. Just try to kind of tap into that story, and don't be so resisting. Just open it up to the Lord as much as you can, and see if he'll use that to plant a desire in you.
That's great, man. Well, Thomas, this has all been super good, just giving us a snapshot of the work you're doing and, man, how God's worked in your life. I'd love to land the plane here and ask, man, what are ways for churches and ministries to connect with you guys and kind of learn more about you and what you're doing?
Mitch, I appreciate you asking. We're so encouraged by the things that God's already doing in our midst. And at the same time, it is encouraged as we are. You kind of look out on the horizon and it's like, man, how are we going to get from here to there still? The biggest way is prayer. If people would come alongside of us and partner with us in prayer. We have some different mechanisms in place to basically let people know where we are and what we're praying for, and what people can come along and pray with us about. We try to do some of that through our family blog, The West London Life, which my wife does a great job managing that, and a couple of social media channels connected to it. Also, just through the Redeemer website, we actually have some information in place there, redeemerqp.com. The first one, the biggest one, is prayer. Another one is, supporting us financially. We moved to London in the summer of 19 with a pretty major financial burden and responsibility that the Lord would have to carry for us. And in God's incredible grace, we moved over with 80% of the 3-year need covered. But we are actively sharing the gospel with people in a city that we're still trusting God. If it's a person or people or a church, they can come alongside and can meet a real financial need to keep a team in position, sharing the gospel, praying, and engaging a community. So maybe it's financial partnership. Finally, look, I'm not playing here. The invitation is out there. Come see us. Yeah. Come visit. Come spend some time with us. If it's your family just passing through on a trip, we'd love to have you pull alongside of some of the things we have going on at Redeemer. Or if your church would be interested in a more formal partnership, like bringing a bunch of people over, especially college students. Man, we are more than ready and willing. We have so much to get into. We just don't have enough hands to cover all of it. So if it's praying, if it's partnering financially, if it's just personally coming over to being with us in the fight, man, we have many needs. Our personal family blog site, thewestlondonlife.com, might be helpful for some others. The church website, redeemerqp.com. Honestly, it's a public email address. Just shoot me an email, thomas@redeemerqp.com. If it's just questions about whatever we talked about today or anything else that the Spirit might put in your heart, I'd love to have that conversation with you.
Yeah, that's awesome. What are some ways? Is there specific ways that if a church did have some college students that wanted to bring a team over to do ministry with you guys, what does that look like? Is there anything that you guys already have planned out or anything like that? I know it's a little weird right now with COVID, but anything on the horizon or any picture you can paint for people?
Yeah, absolutely. So for our churches that are already partnered with us, we're actually in the process right now of building out and preparing. That was a firework, not a gunshot. We're actually in the process of preparing for a virtual mission and prayer trip, where we actually are able to bring people into the neighborhood through a series of videos, different points we're going to actually stop, and we're going to prompt people to pray for specific things. And we're actually going to wrap things up with a Zoom call at the end. So we're already working on a couple of offerings or solutions, if you will, for this season of COVID, where even though people to different parts of Texas and we're confined to still show you around, and we can still be asking the Lord of the harvest to do some work and to prepare the way in the midst of this. For others, spring break is a huge time for us. We were able to run half of what we had planned for spring break, but bringing a group of college students to London, come on, you can fly out on a Friday night. We can meet you on a Saturday morning. We can take the rest of Saturday to get our feet under us, is getting into it on Sunday. We can run hard Monday to Friday, take a Saturday fun day. You're on a flight on Sunday and you're back in class on Monday. It's a pretty great setup. So college students on spring break is huge for us. And we're actually in the process right now of designing a summer internship for college students as well. Well, like I told you from the jump, it's just a huge part of my life. It's a huge part of our story. It's something we always want to be engaged in. So there's multiple things already in operation right now, and there's only more to come in the future.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you said your email is thomas@redeemerqp.com?
QP.com, yeah. That's
.com. Awesome. Well, Thomas, thanks so much for being on today, man. We really do appreciate you, and man, love what you're doing, believe in what you're doing, and hopefully, we can just continue to promote what you're doing and to gather more gospel partnerships as you guys advance the gospel there in London, man.
Man, Mitch, really appreciate this. Kylie, you guys are tremendous hosts. Thanks for having us on and for having us in your prayers. It's really great to be partnered with you. Thank you for your support.
Awesome. Thanks, Thomas. Well, guys, thanks for listening today. This is the Roundup Podcast. If you like the show, man, subscribe, like, review the podcast. We're available on all podcast platforms. At least I think it's most of them, at least. Hey, follow us on social media at SBTC Collegiate, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you haven't yet, join our Facebook group, Roundup Network. There's leaders all across Texas, collegiate leaders in there to idea share, collaborate. It's a good time, so jump in there. But thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.